Welcome to the table, the podcast where we share real stories, struggles, and victories as we walk together in faith. Guys, today's conversation is so sweet. Several of you have asked to hear more about this story, and today is the day. If you know Jenna, you will love the chance to relive the moments that led up to her and Brian becoming us. If you don't know her very well, I think you're really going to enjoy listening to her share this part of her life. There are so many themes mentioned throughout this story: the importance of community, finding mentors that pour into you, listening to godly counsel, waiting on the Lord's timing. I could go on and on. So, here we go. Grab a seat and listen to this week's episode. Welcome back. Feels like we just saw each other. The back and forth has been a lot over the last couple of weeks trying to figure all this out. And so I'm glad to be back here recording another conversation for people to listen to. And it's February, and we are really leaning into this season and talking about love this month. And this is one of the most requested episodes I have received so far, for you to tell your story of how you and Brian fell in love and how your relationship got started. So we're really making the people happy today by letting you talk about this story, and I'm excited to hear it as well. So I'm gonna just let you tell the story and try not to interrupt you but a few times.
It's okay to interrupt. Brian and I actually met. Well, let me just preface it by this. This is probably let me summarize it first and then kind of explain it. We went from single to engaged in 8 days, and we married exactly 2 months after that. And that's probably um, the headlining story of us is that it happens very fast, but it also the Lord worked in it and took many years to make some things happen so quickly. So in the world's eyes, it was way too fast. But the Lord knew what he was doing prior to that. So we actually met in Jamaica on a mission trip, despite the fact that we lived 5 miles or less from each other. So I met him for the first time, and I don't really remember meeting him, but I saw him in the airport for this trip. My grandfather, who our youngest daughter is named after, our only daughter is named after, he hounded me in a good way to go on a mission trip with him. And I really did not want to go. I was in college. I was trying to make good grades. I was trying to hold down a job. I was trying to do all the right things. So I was so far from the Lord. And I think my grandfather knew that at the time and just continued to ask me to go with him. And at that moment, the trip planned was actually to go to Trinidad. And I don't know what all happened or transpired, but it ended up being that the trip we took was to Jamaica. Trinidad got canceled. I thought, yes, I've gotten out of this. And then it turned into being a Jamaica mission trip. And I knew that I was going to know a few people on the trip, but it was mostly people who were older than me. There were a handful of us in our younger mid-20s that were going on this trip. I was a senior in college, maybe a junior in college at the time. And we all kind of met together in the airport. We had met prior at church, like at a local church, and we kind of planned and talked about what we were going to be doing when we went on this mission trip. And Brian was not at that meeting. So I did not actually meet him until we were in the airport and we were all gathering to go to Jamaica. And then I actually got to know him on that trip to Jamaica. We ended up, the church is kind of up on a mountainside. So a lot of the people on this trip decided to stay at the bottom of the mountain in a hotel. The hotel is nothing like our hotels. Like when people hear Jamaica, they think luxury. where we were was not luxury. It was not
Oh, I've
luxurious.
been. I
It
know.
was not
Yeah.
luxurious. It was not what I'd always heard Jamaica was. But I was prepared that we were going on a mission trip and it was not going to be easy, but we were going to teach a vacation Bible school and kind of music school. And I was in college to be a teacher at the time. So I was so close to graduating and so it was a blast. But riding up that hill every day to the church was insane. You're riding in a bus packed to the brim, and they drive on the opposite side of the street, but it's a tiny, like one lane, scary. I was terrified, and I ended up getting kind of sick, and I ended up staying in the church with some of the other young 20 somethings. And Brian was one of those that was there. And there were four or five of us that kind of, when we were there together, we were constantly playing games. We were playing Pass the Pigs, the little tiny little pig game, and you roll them out like dice. We had a blast at night getting to know each other better. But Brian would never be in that group. Brian was always off to the side. He was studying. He was being prepared to preach because I ended up hearing, and what I gained from that trip was friendships, getting my heart right, seeing how blessed I was here back at home. And the Lord really just pulled me in. But I heard Brian preach, and he preached one of the best sermons I've ever heard in my life. I still remember it so well. It was the courtroom. It was talking about he was talking about judgment. And he turned the sanctuary, like he made you feel like you were in a courtroom, and how there were defendants and how God's the judge and you've got to make it right before him. And I mean, I can still remember that sermon today, and I can tell you that made an impression on me. And not in the way that, ooh, I really like him, more of that guy's sold out. He means it. He is not here to mess around. He is sold out to the Lord. And I really admired that about him. Fast forward a few months later, and a dear friend, mutual friend of both of ours, which we didn't realize, said, you should start coming to our church. That friend was going to church with Brian, and I ended up being in Brian's Sunday school class. He was the assistant Sunday school teacher for the college age class. And I learned so much sitting under him and listening to him. And we ended up we had a big friend group and we kind of all hung out together, but it was all because of that Sunday school class. And he's not much older than me. He's only 3 years older than me, but he just really was sold out for the Lord at that time. So we were dear friends. And about 2 to 3 years later, he ended up getting called to pastor a small church in the community that we lived in. And I remember he kept coming back to our church where he taught Sunday school, saying, I need help. I need teachers. I need singers. I need whatever. If the Lord lays it on your heart to come and help this church and help me, then please come. And the Lord really just stirred in my heart. You live 1 mile from that church. Why can't you go and help your friend? And I was in school, about to graduate to be a teacher, to be an elementary school teacher. And I love to sing. And I thought, I can go and help him. There's no reason I can't. And so I went, and the Lord ended up calling me to join the church. And we held that church, one of the first vacation Bible schools there. He came to me and asked, you think we could pull this off? I've written something. Could we use this? And I was like, sure, we can do it. Totally. So we held a vacation Bible school. We had friends come and help us from the other church. We pulled off this amazing vacation Bible school together and with the help of our friends. And on one of the last nights of that vacation Bible school, mutual friends of ours, they're married, and came to us and individually and said, why hadn't you thought of that person? Like, why aren't you with Brian? Why don't y'all consider? And I was like, no, he is my pastor. I would never. That's weird. Like, it never, ever crossed my mind. ever. He was just my friend, and more than that, he was my pastor, and I admired him and I respected him, and I never considered it that way. Um, but on the last night of Vacation Bible School, he brought someone there with him. And it was the first time I was like, ooh, that was weird. And all our friends were like, ooh, this is weird. Do you know about her? And I was like, why would I know about her? No, I didn't know about her. And so that was a little bit strange. And it was the first time that I kind of felt like, I don't know why I feel jealous. I shouldn't feel jealous. He's not mine. But it was like our vacation Bible school. So it was the first time that I kind of had a stirring. Um, but that would have been in the summer of 2006. And in January of 2007, things changed. I can't even explain it, but the Lord just moved really fast. We had had all these years of just being each other's friends and learning and growing in the Lord together and serving the Lord together. And in January, I ended up with one of our dear friends that was in our little church friend group. Brian had announced at church that he was going back home, which for him is West Tennessee. He was going back home to preach that night, and that it was the first church he'd ever preached in, and, to pray for him. And I called our friend and said, hey, do you want to ride with me to West Tennessee? I just want to go support him. And she was like, yeah, let's go. That'd be fun. So we drove out there, and I think that was the first time that he maybe like, wow, what a friend. Um, who would do that for me? And so it was, again, just being there. We were good friends. But then my birthday rolled around towards the end of January, and he called me on my birthday, which that's fine, no big deal. I'm impressed that you remember it as my pastor and as a friend. But he called and we talked for a little while, and he just asked if we could get together. And I thought, why? But I didn't say that out loud. I just said, just me and you? Just the two of us? And he said, yes. I said, do you think that's okay? Because him being a pastor, me being a single, I just didn't think it looked, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought it was weird. So he said, yes, it's fine. And so we met the next day. That was January 23rd that we met for coffee. And we sat there and talked just like we could talk anytime. We were friends. We talked about the church. We talked about our friends. We talked about my new job. We talked about everything. And towards the end, he just kind of put his hands down on the table and looked at me just straight in the face and said, is there an us? And it hit me so hard. I could tell that the Lord had just right then and there answered a prayer, like something I had prayed for my whole life. I knew right in that moment that there was an us and that I was going to marry him. And I cannot even explain it. It just was a peace that came over me, almost like the time that I was saved. It was like I was so sure. I knew he's the one that God has for me. And the Lord, I mean, I guess he illuminated both of our eyes in that moment, because even above our bed now, we have a picture of our wedding day that someone hand drew for us. And underneath it, Brian had the word us put under it, because that was the word that it took. Is there an us? And I knew in that moment there was going to be an us. So 1 week later, he proposed in our church in front of all of our friends and family. He had invited them all, and he proposed, and I said yes. And we got married exactly 2 months later, which that's a story in itself. But we had a week of going from single to engaged, and then 2 months to planning a wedding, and we got married.
It's so sweet. And I know more of the details, and so I know that's like the shortened version, but I need you to talk about one
Yes,
more part of it because it's
sure.
gold. I just think it's so sweet. You've got to tell about the letters.
So he had written, well, not only had he written letters, but he had saved from the time that he was a teenager. He worked at a grocery store in West Tennessee, and he saved money for a ring. He put back money every week that he got paid for a ring. So he didn't even, when the time came that the Lord said, this is her, this is it, he was able to get a ring just like that because he had already saved for it. But he had been writing for years. Since the time that he was saved, the Lord laid it on his heart to fully invest in the Lord, like just dig into the word, fall into the Lord, and he knew that the Lord was going to provide everything he needed. And so he started writing to his future wife. He started writing her poems, he started writing her letters, and on the night that we were engaged, which I had told him specifically in that 1 week, 8 days, we dated or yeah,
Uh-huh.
whatever. In that 1 week, I was like, please, whatever you do, when it's time to be engaged or get engaged, don't do it at the church. I just don't want to be at the church. And that's what the Lord had laid on his heart, that he was supposed to do it at the church. And so he had told me that that Wednesday night, we were going to introduce me, like the church already knows me, but he wanted to introduce the idea that the two of us would be dating. And so he had kind of kept me out of the sanctuary. I was in his office and he was going to kind of let the church know I'm going to be dating someone. This is who I'm going to be dating. I want y'all to pray for us. Which, looking back on it now, I should have thought through that. But when
Hindsight.
when when he had our friend that I didn't tell the part about my friend that went with me to West Tennessee to listen to him preach. When he asked me to meet up with him, just the two of us, and I thought that is so weird. We can't do that. I called her and I said, "Hey, Brian wants to meet up just the two of us," and she's like, "Well, he's going to tell you one of three things. First, he's going to tell you how bad of a sinner you are." I was like, great. Two, he's going to tell you he's leaving the church, and I thought, no, surely not. Or three, she said, he's going to tell you he's in love with you. I was like, oh, no way. So she kind of had a whole hand in this because when he did tell me, he didn't tell me he was in love with me. He told me there was an us. Uh, but it went real fast. And so she was the one who came that night of our engagement and got me out of his office, out of the pastor's office, and brought me to the front of the church. Everyone was there. My mom, my dad, my grandfather, his friends and family. He had packed the church with everyone, plus our church members, was everyone that had meant something to us or had encouraged us or had said, yeah, you two should be together. So when I walked out with our friend leading me, he was on his knee in the altar area, and around him in an arc, like on the floor, were all the letters that he had written his future wife, which ended up being me. And they were all on the floor. And then on the day of our wedding, he had actually put them in a book for me so that I would have them always. But he was prepared. It all happened very fast. Same for our wedding. You only have 2 months to plan a wedding. We were going to do June, and then the Lord just kept shutting all these doors and made March available. So I didn't have to take off of work because we had spring break. So we got married uh, and went on our honeymoon in the week of my spring break. So I didn't have to miss any school. Um, I didn't take any days off. The Lord worked out every single tiny detail and made it so easy. Like everything I could have ever dreamed this was better.
Oh, it's so good. Thanks for adding that. And I think you talked about something else there too that I've heard you when I've heard you tell the story in the past, you talk about these friends and these mentors. That you guys didn't just do this by yourself with people who didn't know you well. Like you really leaned on those people who were mentoring you, but also who had just done life with you over the last couple of years
Right.
to help you feel some of that assurance. Like the Lord assured you that this was the right thing. But then those people came around you too, your community in that time came around you too, and it helped assure you that this was from the Lord, like that this was a blessing he had given you, and this is what he had always intended for the two of you.
Brian went to our pastor at the time and just said, I'm supposed to marry her. We're planning on June. I just want to have your blessing or your input before we go through with this. And our pastor at the time said, bring her in here tomorrow. I will marry you tomorrow. Like everyone around us knew. And then on our wedding day, along with that book of letters that he had written his future wife, he had compiled a book of our love story, like all of our texts to each other he had put in there, everything, all our pictures, everything from the time we had first met in Jamaica to the, current moment, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the Lord had done a lot to build our friendship. Um, and then on the front of the page, it was the picture of us, our engagement photos, and then underneath it, he had gotten 8 different couples or people to sign in agreement with us. Like if you feel that this is something that we should do, if you prayerfully think this is right, will you sign an agreement? He went through and thought of everything. We had that godly, wise counsel, and they all agreed this is what you should do. Now, friends that weren't necessarily following after the Lord or had seen us thought I was crazy, thought he was
Yeah.
nuts. But those who were around us and that had seen us serve the Lord together knew what we didn't even know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's what's so intriguing about your story. Like people heard you say, I went from, single to married in, 2 months. And that's like intriguing, just sucks people in and they want to hear more. And so I can imagine living it out and it going so fast and it being very countercultural to what
Right.
the world believes is the right way to go about that kind of thing. So I just love all those little details, all those little moments sprinkled in where you had peace the whole time, but where the Lord just assured you with the people around you and your pastors and the community that walked alongside you.
Well, and as a girl, as a young woman, you always dream or you always think about who you're going to marry, what's your wedding day going to be like. And
Yeah.
I'd never envisioned it happening like this. But it taught me the importance or showed me the importance of it doesn't matter when the Lord is in it. So I wanted all these certain colors for my wedding that I'd always, envisioned. And when it came down time, I had 2 months to plan a wedding because the Lord said, this is when you're doing it. This is when it's open. This is when I want you to be married. I don't want you to have this long extended engagement. Everyone around you is ready for y'all to be married now. I'm ready for you to be married now. So let's do this. And so whatever color was available is the one I went with. Whichever one, which one could we get here in 8 weeks? That's pretty much bridesmaids dresses, flowers. It taught
Yeah.
you that it really didn't matter because it didn't matter. I thought it mattered so much, but it was one day in this great grand scheme of life. And the Lord taught me that those things that I thought were so important weren't because He was blessing me with my future. Like that fast.
Yeah. I think when I have a lot of people around me that are engaged or dating or, walking through that season of life. And something that I learned through mine and Justin's experience, and I think probably your experience too, is like just like your salvation is this one moment, it's the beginning. Um,
Right.
so is your wedding, right? It's
Yeah.
just the beginning. It's just the
Right.
start, and we put a lot of focus. I think our culture does, and I don't
Yes.
think it's all bad, but I think we put
No.
a lot of focus on what does your wedding day look like, and that
Hmm.
causes a lot of stress and a lot of turmoil during that time. And then it's like truly that is 8 hours. That is the
Right.
beginning of what you hope is years and years and years and years and years
Right.
of marriage. And so I
Yes.
think that's a great example of how your wedding is your wedding and it's special, but it's really just the beginning. It's not what it's all
Yes.
about.
Right.
Okay, so now you've been married for 18 years. right?
Almost,
You're about to be
almost,
19, 18.
no, about to be out to 18,
Okay,
22.
about to be 18 years.
Yeah,
Um,
18 in
as a
March.
mom, what, from your experience, what is the advice you would give your kids as they start to walk through the dating and engagement and marriage season?
Well, as a mom, well, not just as a mom, but now looking back on what God did for me, from the time I was in third, fourth grade, everyone around me was like, "Do you have a boyfriend? Who's your boyfriend?" Like, that's just a topic of conversation with our children.
Mm,
Um,
I
I
know.
can't tell how many times I overhear people asking my boys, "Do you have a girlfriend? Who's your girlfriend? Do you like somebody?" Why do they have to? Like, why is that the focus? I see now that I wasted a lot of valuable time on relationships that weren't going to end up being important. They I wasted a lot of effort and time and heartache and just all the things. Even as a young, middle schooler, high schooler, the Lord didn't make that happen until I was in my 20s. And it happened so fast that I wish, and I tell our children, or we tell our children now, wait on the Lord. You do not have to date. You do not have to waste your time being so committed to one person. If you will commit your life to the Lord, He will fulfill His purpose for you. Don't try to look so hard. Don't try to force these relationships on your kids. Like, as a mom, I don't ever want to encourage or force relationships on my kids. I want the Lord to take care of that. And so my role as a mom is to trust that the Lord will put the right people in their path. And I want to pray for that person right now, whoever that is. My job as a mom is to encourage my kids to seek after the Lord, and He will make your path straight. He will put everything in your path that you need if you will serve and follow Him. And I wish that would have been the focus that I had as a teen, because it sure would have made things a lot easier.
Yeah. I can I understand that feeling about everyone asking about, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? My girls are little, and that
Yeah.
is still a question people ask them. And in our house, that is a word we don't use.
No, we don't.
According to Justin Collier, we do not say the word boyfriend. Those are not allowed.
Exactly.
So yeah, it is a big focus, and it's like, what are some other things that you could ask my kids instead?
Yeah.
And why is that the thing that we're so drawn to? And I'm probably guilty. Like I've probably done that too, and asked like a teenager, um, about a relationship that they're in. But I agree. I think if you're following the Lord, He's going to bring that person to you, in His time, and you might avoid some heartache and
Well,
trials if you wait.
and you'll avoid rushing what
Yeah.
the Lord doesn't want. Like, I think my purpose, especially through high school and early years of college, was find the one. He's
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, he's here. He's got to be near
He's
me.
here.
Yeah, I mean, he's in front of you. He has to be. And so I think that became much of my focus instead of the Lord being my focus. And I wasn't as prepared as I could have been because I had wasted a lot of time looking for the one when really all I needed to look to was the one. And He provided me my one just like that. And I think there's importance in, as parents, just reminding your kids there's nothing wrong with you if you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend. You don't need one. God has made you perfect. He has time, He has plans for you, and the time will come when He shows you that one. And until then, just follow Him. Make friends, be friends with everybody, be kind to others, and enjoy the time that you have in each season, and allow God to bring you that one that He has for you.
That's so good. I'm reading this marriage book, or I'm trying to. I'm a whole chapter in. And one of the things that the author talks about, he draws this triangle, and I've seen this and heard this 1,000 times. But it just hit me differently this time, and it's, we say that God should be like the top priority, and you're both growing your relationship with the Lord, and as you do that, like you're the bottom of the triangle, and as you grow closer to Him, you grow closer to each other at the same time.
Right.
But some a spin he put on it, I guess, was that, we are growing closer in body, soul, and spirit as husband and wife. And sometimes we get that flipped, right? Like spirit
Right.
is truly the foundation. That's what you should
Hmm.
grow in first. And as you
Hmm.
grow in that, as you grow closer to the Lord, then you can grow closer in all of those other ways too. But you
Right.
have to start with that foundation. And I know you and Brian talked about that last week about, that was something that made your marriage easy, was it was built on that foundation.
Right.
But I think sometimes we just get those priorities a little out of order and lose
We
sight
do.
of that. And so your story is a perfect testament to starting that foundation with the Lord, and then he works the rest of those things out as you grow closer to him.
Yep.
Oh, it's so good. I can't wait to hear what people think about it. Thank you so much for being
You're
willing
welcome.
to share. And people will be really excited to finally get some of those sweet details from your story. So
Thank you.
thanks, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the table. We hope today's conversation encouraged you as you seek Jesus in the big moments and the little ones. You'll find all the resources we mentioned today in the show notes. Feel free to share this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, or share your thoughts with us. Next week, onto the table, I'll share some of my own story. While our story isn't exactly the same, there are still those overarching themes of God's faithfulness and, most importantly, His timing. We'll focus in a little more on dating and engagement, but our hope is that you leave feeling encouraged regardless of the season you're in right now. See you back here next week.